So, Premier League football is back at Dean Court this Saturday, and it's Wolves that are travelling down to the south coast for the 3 p.m. kickoff. And here's how I think Bournemouth can dominate and run out victorious over Wolves. Firstly, I think it's worth looking at who Bournemouth will actually be putting out to start in this game. I think they'll go unchanged from the 4-2 defeat against Liverpool. However, we of course now have Ben Doak and Amin Adli in contention, and I do think we will see both of them on Saturday. Now, of course, Doak and Adli could both start. I do think if one is more likely to start than the other, it probably would be Ben Doak, as obviously he's had a few more days to sort of embed himself into the team and get to grips with Iraola's style of football. So therefore, Doak could start, but I do think both new signings will feature from the bench. I've already done a video on Ben Doak, emphasising just how important I think he'll be in Bournemouth's forthcoming season. Looking at Amin Adli, if he is to start on Saturday, I think it would probably be out on the left side or in the 10. I think it depends on fitness, availability. So if he would start out on the left, it could actually be really interesting. So what I would expect Iraola to do is to straight swap Adli for David Brooks and play Adli out on the left and Semenyo on the right, leaving Evanilson up top. So I actually think that creates quite a natural rotation, because we know Evanilson likes to drop deep, get on the ball, link up with play. Amin Adli, under both Erik ten Hag and Xabi Alonso at Bayer Leverkusen, did like to move into forward positions. He started in those 2 10s behind the striker, so he was comfortable moving out to the left side and also moving up front. I do think if Evanilson drops in to receive the ball, a really nice rotation could be found with Adli swinging in up top to take the Brazilian's space for the time being. Once he got on the ball and shifted play, then of course Evanilson, as we know, makes those darting runs through the middle. That's of course where Adli can shift back out wide, but still in touch with play and able to impact the game. Now, from a physical standpoint, this looks set to be a really interesting game, because both Wolves and Bournemouth played big teams in the Premier League last time out. Bournemouth of course had Liverpool and Wolves had Man City. Therefore, you'd expect the running stats to be slightly inflated as above perhaps what they are usually, obviously given the fact that Liverpool and Manchester City dominated possession. But Bournemouth did outshine Wolves in these physical metrics. In terms of total distance, the Cherries covered 112.3 kilometres, with 3.8 of that being sprinting, and a total of 174 sprints overall. Now that's a stark comparison to Wolves, who posted a total distance covered of 109.6, 2.4 kilometres of that being sprinting, and around 60 less sprints than Iraola's side. And it really just does reflect the style of football. We of course know that Andoni Iraola likes his team to be intense, and it's also why I do think these 2 wing signings could be really influential. There are some interesting points of exploitation which I do think Bournemouth could take advantage of. Now, on paper, Wolves play a 3 at the back system with wing backs. However, this is a screenshot from their game against Man City. So you can see their 3 centre-backs here, Totti Gomez, Agbadou and Matt Doherty. What you'll notice immediately is that the centre-backs are very tight together, and this is in an attempt to stop Manchester City sending runners through the middle and finding them in behind, which for those that watch the game or watch the highlights know that this was actually their undoing. But nonetheless, you can see the wing-backs there as well, Wolf and Hoover, and they're actually very, very deep, considering they are supposed to be almost wide midfielders / wing-backs. And Wolves have really been penned in here by Manchester City. You can see on the far side is Jeremy Doku, and Oscar Bob is slightly out of shot on this near side, but the 2 wingers are holding immense width. And essentially, this comes from the Wolves wing-backs not wanting to go out and press either winger in Jeremy Doku or Oscar Bob. Both players are very technically gifted and can make you look a little bit silly, go around you and get across into the box, or go on to score themselves. So that's what's happening here. The Wolves wing-backs are sitting in and holding firm. And I think this could be something we see them do, especially to the likes of Antoine Semenyo for Bournemouth on Saturday. Now, Semenyo is similar to Jeremy Doku in a sense where he likes to shift your centre of mass around, he likes to get you off balance, manage to get round you, get shots off, and of course Semenyo's 2-footedness just emphasises this a lot more. Now, what I also want to draw your attention to is the 4 men in midfield. And actually, only 2 of them are centre midfielders. The other 2 is Bellegarde and Munetsi. Now those two players are the wingers, the players that are supposed to be either side of Strand Larsen if you look at Wolves' shape on paper. Essentially this is one big domino effect. Because the Wolves centre-backs don't want to be wider to look after the wingers, the wing-backs for Wolves have had to sit back, and therefore that means that the wingers for Wolves, so the two players either side of Strand Larsen, are having to compensate and do some of the defensive work. But of course, Bellegarde and Munetsi are not 6s or 8s, and I don't think they possess the defensive qualities to really do the proper job in there. And this is why I think Bournemouth could be really successful against Wolves with their three-man midfield. And what Man City like to do a lot of the time is almost vacate that midfield, send a player like a Bernardo Silva or a Ryan Cherky through the midfield into the forward line to affect the game. Now for Bournemouth, that man is Justin Kluivert. He loves to get through up towards Evanilson and get in and around the box. It's where he scored a lot of his goals last season. However, of course, it does look like Kluivert won't be fit for Saturday, and therefore you can expect probably either Alex Scott or Tavernier to start in that 10. Now those two are very different players, and I don't think they'll be as confident joining Evanilson up front, and therefore we will have an increased presence in midfield. And that could really cause Wolves issues because really with only two proper centre midfielders in there, it gives Bournemouth the opportunity to actually dominate the ball and pop it around into pockets of space, then looking to move it wide. So Bournemouth really have multiple options when it comes to breaking down this Wolves defence. Now on the ball, when Wolves are looking to play out, Hoover, who is their right wing back / right midfielder, really likes to hold the width. As shown in the screenshot from Wolves versus Man City, Agbadou is on the ball, he's looking to switch the play, and there is Hoover. As you can see, his body weight is shifted forward, he's ready to start running in behind. And I think it will be interesting to see what Iraola decides to do, because I do think Adrien Truffert will dominate these one-on-one battles with Hoover. And with Hoover being so advanced, it leaves Bournemouth's left winger very open and free. And that could be David Brooks. And we saw when Brooks was given space against Liverpool, he was dangerous. He obviously put in that cross for Semenyo's goal and also just generally looked pretty bright. But if Wolves are going to leave lots of space out on Bournemouth's left side, then you probably want someone who's a touch quicker and can really accelerate into those spaces. And that's where I can see Iraola making his changes, bringing on someone like Adley to go out onto the left wing, or Doak to go on the right and Semenyo shifting out to the left. But another thing to note is that you can see one of the Wolves forwards has dropped into midfield slightly. And that could also cause Bournemouth issues. It's something we saw against Liverpool. Ekitike, for the first goal, dropped into midfield and Diakite stopped going with him, and of course Senesi missed his tackle. But that initial following into midfield is something that Bournemouth struggled with on the Premier League opener. Now I don't think Iraola is going to choose Tyler Adams as the man to look over his shoulder and pick up a man coming from the Wolves forward line. I think that would be a bit of a waste of what Adams brings to the side. Iraola needs him to be dynamic and winning the ball all over the pitch. So therefore, I think it will be up to the Cherries centre-backs again to look to follow a man into midfield and dominate those one-on-ones. For example, if it was Munetsi dropping in for Wolves, then you'd assume that probably Marcos Senesi would go and follow him. That will leave Jurgen Strand Larsen and Bellegarde. Diakite, you'd assume, would look after Strand Larsen, and Adam Smith on the right would look to take care of Bellegarde. Now, of course, that would leave the aptly named Wolf on the left side for Wolves. He is their wing-back, but it would be a case of the right winger for Bournemouth doing a lot of legwork to track him. I do think we've seen Bournemouth perhaps struggle against a back three. And personally, I think it's because there are three centre-backs. It is easier to play out and it does almost negate the pressing, specifically that Evanilson does. I remember seeing him against Man United when they came to Dean Court at the back end of last season. And Evanilson did a lot of running, but it was partially ineffective because Manchester United had such a deep three centre-backs that they were really able to create that angle and spread the play relatively easily. And of course, against Crystal Palace, specifically the 0-0 away at Selhurst Park, again, Bournemouth just struggled to really get a grip of the game. So it is really important that if Bournemouth are to get a result, they're organised right from the off and Iraola builds the correct game plan. Now, I think whoever plays out on the left for Bournemouth on Saturday will be absolutely ecstatic with the screenshot. So you can see Man City are looking to heavily play down the right, and the left winger, in this case Jeremy Doku, is really holding the width out on the near side. Normally, Wolves' right centre-back is Matt Doherty, but as you can see here, he's taken up a more central position. And that's because Totti and Agpadu are having to match up with Manchester City on the far side, who have 3 forwards in that channel. And so with the Wolves centre-backs going over to create a 3v3, it does give the left winger for Manchester City some space. Now, you can see Hoover on the near side tracking back to try and help defensively, but he is miles away from it, primarily because he is such an advanced wing-back. And that means if City were to shift the play and try and find their left winger, it would leave him pretty much one-on-one with Matt Doherty. And if you were to make this really Bournemouth specific, you'd have Adrien Truffert getting on the overlap of the left winger, which could create a 2v1, or if Hoover did get back, a 2v2. Either way, I do fancy Bournemouth's chances in either of those situations. So a slightly shorter video, but one which I do think gives a lot of detail into what you can expect to see out on the pitch this Saturday. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will thank you in advance for any likes, shares, comments, or any feedback. I'm of course always open to comments about what you're seeing. So thank you for watching.